In our research, we are increasingly invited to look at human consciousness. Some people would say humanoid consciousness. Well, our first reaction is, of course, it's our consciousness, our collective. But we learned that that collective consciousness is far more expanded than we thought it was. Well, in the first place, what we call our world is one of the four worlds of the Earth. And I will show an image in a minute for those who are not familiar with it. And there are beings living there that we can't see because they're out of phase with us. And for example, we call them the She or the Blue Rays. All of them beings that are part actually of our collective. Now recently, my hiking buddy and dear friend Daniel Maddux was asking a question about the Anunnaki. And he said, well, we are looking at all these human races and human consciousness. What is their place? So that induced a discussion that he recorded and that we like to share because I think a lot of people will be interested in that. But before I do that, we refer in that discussion about the four worlds. Let me show an image for those who are not familiar. And this image shows that that human consciousness has different levels, and these different levels were experienced in different worlds. The first world is the world that we can call of the masters, and many of them are the masters as we know them. The second world, and I should say they resonate with different aspects of Mother Earth, like the first one was the spiritual body of Mother Earth, the second the mental body, and the second world is the world of Lemuria as we know it. The third world is the world of Atlantis, that resonates with the energies of the emotional body of the Earth, and we, the fourth world, our world, are actually resonating with the physical body of Mother Earth, and that's why we are so physically oriented. But all those worlds are still existing, and there are human consciousness beings living there, part of the collective. Well, this short introduction may help you to understand what is following now.
Come sit over here, actually, so that way we're both looking at the camera.
Okay.
So, we're going to talk about the Anunnaki and their consciousness and how it's been induced into the Earth.
Okay.
So, who are the Anunnaki and what's their relationship to the Earth and the human race? Let's just throw something out to start.
Well, that's already a huge question. Anyway, to be truly honest, I have a lot more question marks than answers.
We have to start somewhere.
Yes, we will start somewhere. One of the things that is important to begin with is that we have thought that human collective consciousness was connected to the fourth world. It is our collective consciousness.
Right.
And we begin now to understand that it is way bigger, and we talked about the She, and now we added Blue Rays. We begin to understand that there were giants, and that they were part of it, and maybe still are part of it. So more and more, this understanding of the human collective consciousness is expanding. Yeah. And then there are a lot of stories. The giants was one of them, Anunnaki is another one of them, and recently we discovered 8 other races that is still partly beyond my full understanding, but the signs are there. Right. The only way to understand the collective if we can step out of all the beliefs we have. Yeah? So that includes the beliefs about Anunnaki. Because if you accept that this is how it is, because it has been described by Mr. Such or Mr. So, yes, at that moment you're locked into a certain way of looking. Yeah?
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and that has been my wrestling, because in the past I've also read Sitchin, and so I had my concepts and my doubts, my this and that.
Sure.
So I then had the tendency to push it aside.
Okay.
Stories, legends and that kind of things. Yeah, and yes, there are sufficient indications that there was something like that, but you know, we have also a lot of legends of which we know that is, a translation of something that we can only translate in this way because of our way of thinking in the fourth world. Yeah?
Right.
So all of that is coloring our understanding, including that of the Anunnaki. So when you asked that through, or you made a comment more about who are the Anunnaki and do they have grids? Are they part of the human consciousness? My first tendency was, no, of course not, that's a story.
Right.
Wrong. Totally wrong. And that put me in a kind of a spin because, whoa, if that story has some truth,
Right.
and there were Anunnaki, and there are aspects of that in the human collective. What actually is the human collective, and you know, how has that truly influenced us and is influencing us today? Because if it's part of the collective, it is part of the collective.
Correct.
You know, it gives continuous impulse in the same way as the giants give impulses, the she give impulses, and so on and so forth. So that was my first, let's say, a little bit of a shocking understanding. Like, my goodness, there is something like a grid that holds still the information of who the Anunnaki were.
Okay.
And that brings up the big question: are the Anunnaki as they are described in the different stories? And then it becomes a bit more difficult. Well,
Yes.
I think there are two aspects for me. You know, number one is we have the stories and the images. So obviously, you know, there are sufficient, let's say sufficient evidence that there were certain beings, because there are, you know, all kinds of remnants found where they are depicted and so on and
Right.
so forth. You know.
Yes.
So what that means is they were then apparently existing in the fourth world,
Right.
because
Correct.
otherwise you can't see them, not depict them. Although I must say in the early times they were still able to look more or less in what we call now the etheric.
Right.
So they could have been more etheric, astral than physical. You
Okay.
know? And still there could be images that have been passed on and put onto tablets or whatever they have been put on.
Okay, so there's this question of the term Anunnaki means those who from heaven to earth came.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, it's not, oh, the Syrians are the humans from Mars. So there's the implication it could be a group of beings, not just one specific species. And the second thing is, if you look at some of the statues and things from Iraq, from Sumer, the ancient civilization, there's a lot of depictions of them as being giant humans, but there's others that look more like a reptilian head. So the question then we need to finesse is, was it just one group? Was it just one humanoid group, or was it several different species that came and induced each of their consciousness?
And what I cannot, of course, not fully answer that question.
Okay.
The only thing that I know is when I tune into that, what I call the grid system,
Okay.
the information system of the Anunnaki, then I would say it was a far more diverse group. Does that mean that they came from different places? That I don't know.
Okay.
For me, it feels like a pretty reasonable, homogeneous group
Okay.
that had a lot of different, let's say, forms, if you want, expressions, far more diverse than we have.
Okay.
You know, so anyway, so the other part of the story is that they existed, what is it, 450,000 years ago?
They came here at that time. That's
Sure.
the story.
That's the story. Well, if that's true, then you go into the second world.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So third and second.
Yes, so you get the third and the second world. And that is the feeling that I have, as far as I can see, and I haven't done research yet, but that's one of the
Interesting.
things, put it on the list. You know, I
Yes.
think there are, as far as I understand, there are two grids. And one grid is that consciousness aspect of Anunnaki in the second world, and the other one in the third world. Now, what I feel that has happened is
Okay.
that the That's one of the interesting things, that when they came in the second world, those who stayed more on Earth were caught in the same descent of consciousness as, let's say, the human race itself was.
Interesting.
So I think what actually has happened is there was not a story about slaves and this and this and that.
Right.
It was when they began to realize that we were going down and down and down in frequency, and knowing that, you know, we would go more into physicality. They already used, you can say, some of the DNA of what were hominids in order to create that race, but that later was through mixture, you know, was leading to a intermixture that, you know, what are now still, is there remnants of Anunnaki? I think there is, but they have integrated in our system now. You know, the possibility that some of it is still in the second and third world, I like to explore a bit more.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me. And maybe the third world, but not the second.
I don't think the second. No, I agree. They started there, but there is definitely a possibility that there is some stuff, remnants of that, in the third world.
Okay.
So what it all set into motion for me is that understanding that we don't understand the human race, right?
Yes.
And that some of those stories are correct,
Right.
but not always placed in the right context.
Okay.
And we always try to translate a story in terms of our world.
Our understanding.
Yeah, that's our understanding, because that's the
Right.
only thing we have.
Yes.
So that makes it so difficult. And that's why I say we have to let go of all the concepts. As if we don't know anything. Okay, we use the word Anunnaki as the possibility of an alien race, like the blue race, or
Yeah.
you know, some others that joins our collective in a sense. Not that they, I think, intended to do that, but that's what actually happened.
Yes.
And as a consequence, there is a lot of information that maybe can be used in a positive way instead of a negative way, because this all, the Anunnaki did this and that, and it sounds all very
Well,
negative.
that's how Sitchin and others interpreted the Sumerian tablets.
Yeah.
We don't have any Sumerians from 5,000 years ago to explain it to us, so we don't know if that's an accurate translation or not.
No. So what we need to do is not go to the translations,
Right.
but okay, we can accept that they exist. I also very clearly feel that there is information in the collective, in the grids,
Right.
and that can help us to get a better image. The
Well-
problem with that, of course, is we still do interpretations, you know.
Well, I was thinking more directly of trying to connect with the beings, because if their grids are still here, maybe some of those people are still here in the second, third world that we could talk to, communicate with. I don't know about the fourth world.
I don't think they're in the fourth world.
Okay,
So
so
what is in the fourth world, maybe, you know, into the DNA system of us. In that sense, I can agree.
okay, but in the second and third world, they should still be here, or they should still be accessible, that we could communicate with them in some way, so we can get information directly from them, as opposed to having to go and read what somebody else said or claims.
To the degree that even their stories are still 100% correct, because even for them, so many thousands of 10,000s of years have passed.
Right.
So, you know, in a sense, you can say all information is still there.
Okay.
Second thing you can say, we don't have the ability to translate it as it was in those days.
Right.
And I think we shouldn't. I think we should use that what we can translate
Okay.
for our current evolution.
Okay.
And otherwise we get stuck in the past and how it was, that
Right.
we never ever will be 100% correct with.
Right.
And then we try to figure out something that's costing a lot of time and energy and lead
Yes.
to nothing.
Well, it's just, what can we apply to what we're doing now?
Exactly.
That's the part.
That is definitely a very important question.
Right.
And an interesting one, because we are now going. So we have all this talk about evolution, right?
Yes.
Now, how can you talk about evolution if you don't know what is evolving?
Right.
Yeah. So the human race is evolving. Is it only the fourth world? No, of course not.
Right.
Yes, we are only a part of the whole. It's one huge collective consciousness, and we all have the ability to tap into elements of it
Right.
that we then activate into what we call the manifestation of this world. But all the other things are existing also in what we call the invisible world.
Yes.
And that is the part where we get lost because we don't see it, we don't. We try
Sense
to
it.
interpret it based on what we sense and what we feel,
Right.
and that sensing and feeling is underdeveloped. Sorry
know.
for those who feel offended, but I think it's underdeveloped.
Okay.
At least from the fourth world perspective, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that is what I came up with respect to the Anunnaki. So yeah, I think they it is like the Earth is a little bit like a pitfall, right? So you come into the Earth, into whatever world you come, and then you go, unless you have the ability to hook onto something that stabilizes your consciousness, otherwise you go zzz,
Yeah.
from the second to the third, and then you're in the fourth, and here we are. So there are some that simply had no choice and ended up here, and some that choose to incarnate in because they want to help through this particular frequency system, how the Earth to evolve.
Okay. So, well, this that raises another question: is are the Anunnaki interested in participating in the training center and what we're doing with the She and the four worlds?
I have not the slightest idea.
So you haven't actually connected with them?
Nope.
Okay.
No. The only thing that I've done is, okay, do they exist? And if so, where do I place them within
Right,
what
right.
we do know?
Okay.
Yeah. Can I give certain descriptions?
Yeah.
But I realized when I was connecting, that's a whole different world again,
Yes.
And to sit with that and to feel into that and to analyze that, I don't know whether it's my job to do that.
Okay.
But it is definitely important to be aware of it, because we have this. I have this idea to develop a whole series of courses on consciousness.
Right. Exactly.
So here we are. We see the existing consciousness. We see developing consciousness. We even don't understand the existing consciousness
True.
system. So, okay. We started with the fourth world and the second and the third, and then the third course, for whatever reason, is delayed for a moment. But I begin to understand why, because the third course was meant to include all the different races,
Yes.
and one after the other is appearing. You came up with the giants, like, oh wow, yeah, the giants exist. At least they have existed and are still existing,
Right.
and that means they are a part of it, and that means that when you talk about the collective, it holds that information as well. Well, now we add the Anunnaki. There are this 8 races that I had not even a clue they existed.
Right.
There are 2 new races, like Ma.
Yes.
There is
yes.
this tremendous development of human consciousness on Earth that has ties with all these consciousness systems outside of the Earth, and we are, you can say, part of the humanoid consciousness of the solar system,
Yes.
and part of the humanoid consciousness of the galaxy, and you can go on and on and on and
Sure.
on. So
Let's just stop with the galaxy. Let's just pause for a moment.
yes, well, let me slam the brakes.
Okay.
But the key point for me is, okay, this is all existing, and when it is existing, at least we need to understand more of our consciousness here on Earth, so that we
Right.
can collaborate together for, I think, the importance of the evolution of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad you brought up the Anunnaki, because I would never have thought to include them or to look at them, because I'm already more than overwhelmed.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
somebody must be talking to me because these questions just pop up at the strangest times.
Well, they're good questions.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought them up, because if we really want to be serious about humanoid consciousness, we need to include them.
Right.
But I would say there will be a follow-up.
Oh,
Yeah, because I have to look at them
okay.
and
Okay.
see, get more information, see where to place them,
Sure.
and look at the grids. But you know, in due time.
I agree.
In due time.
Okay.
That's
That's all the questions I have.
good. Yeah.
Okay. We'll turn it off.